We're so glad you joined us. My name is Peter Iverson. I am the president of the Substance Use Disorder Advisory Committee here in Monroe County government. We are so happy to be able to put this back on with all of the members here today. But it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce someone who needs no introduction. That is right, I'm talking about your senator, State Senator Shelli Yoder. She's here today to connect with us on our theme by building those threads together, what we heard this morning about building connections in our community. So hopefully we'll be tying everything together. Yeah, all right, I got one left. All right, as you all know, Senator Yoder has been serving this community for a very long time. She served on the county council here in Monroe County, and at that time, she co-founded this event. So that we owe a large debt of gratitude to her for her work in this field. And she took what she learned here in Monroe County and has been fighting for us in the state Senate up in Indianapolis on these very issues of health and treatment and the recovery journey that we've been learning so much about. So, without further ado, someone is going to come to this stage and explain what on earth are those clips on your table. Folks, Senator Shelli Yoder.
Thank you, Councilor Iverson. Yes, thank you. It is wonderful to be here, and I have to get myself situated here. I hope it all works. Hi. You've had a long day, and we're going to get to some crafting in a bit, but I first wanted to say thank you. Thank you for sticking around for this. I know you're tired, you've been summiting all day, and you're ready to go apply some of the things that you've learned and continue doing your good work. Stitching our stories together. Growing up in rural Indiana and in the Mennonite Church, it provided extraordinary experiences, stories to tell that at the time seemed ordinary. Tuesdays at Shore Mennonite Church in Shipshewana, Indiana, meant Sewing Day, a time of stitching and crafting, basting and pinning, quilting. Tuesdays were sewing. And these individuals, mostly women, all women, all women, would come together and make tens of quilts, sometimes one a week. And each year they would be auctioned off around this time in September for poverty relief and the work of peace and justice around the globe. These memories of quilt making and the quilts themselves and those who stitched them whole, is the metaphor that I want to use this afternoon to share with you how we build recovery in connection. But I do need your help. I ask that as we spend the next few minutes together, listening, connecting, creating, that perhaps words will come to mind for you, names, memories, ideas, dreams, prayers even, of your lives coming into your consciousness, and I want you to write them down. And write them down and save them, and later on we're going to stitch together, piece by piece, our own recovery quilt. But first, I want to talk to you about the stories of 3 quilts. I want to talk to you about some programs in Indiana that are changing lives. They're in our states, they're right here in our communities. Individuals and whole families impacted by substance use disorders and the hope that is found and stitched together in the connections that we create in our recovery. First, I'm going to share with you the story of my grandma Yoder's, the quilt she made for me from Grandma Yoder. And then the next quilt is Grandma Hirschberger, my other grandma who made another quilt for me. And finally, we're going to use our crafting skills to create our own recovery quilt and tell our own story, or at least continue the story. First, Grandma Yoder's quilt. Don't think that people who quilt are not tough. My Grandma Yoder was one tough broad. Her name was Grace. She was not orphaned, but given away to her neighbors at the age of 2, when her mother died in 1920 because of the great virus pandemic, the Spanish flu. And it is a sad twist that my grandmother would have one of her daughters, my Aunt Shelli, who was also a wickedly talented seamstress and a badass, I'm going to say that here because she was, die of the great virus pandemic of 2020, 100 years later. My Grandma Grace, as tough as she was kind, as stoic as she was expressive, as inaccessible as she was approachable. Grandma Yoder owned and ran, along with my grandfather, a filling station, pumping gas, fixing cars, servicing small engines. People say, even as a matter of fact, a woman I serve with in the Senate who still represents LaGrange County, Senator Suglick, would tell me, your grandmother was the better mechanic of the two. She wore coveralls every day. She wore coveralls throughout her 5 pregnancies. And you did not know she was pregnant. She'd be working on your car one day, and the next day you'd come, and she'd be under your hood with a newborn. She was tough. But generational trauma teaches us to hide things. We talked about shrouded stigma and shame, secret shame. And that certainly was the case. And so when she stitched this quilt together, when I graduated from high school, she gave it to me in what is now so profoundly powerful purple. One program that I want to talk about that I know would be stitched in this quilt if this quilt had been around, but the stories that I would hear her talk about. But there is a program in Indiana called, you have to slow down for this one, the Pregnancy Promise Program, PPP. The Pregnancy Promise Program is seeing some success in breaking some of that generational trauma. It's actually a program that we have here in Indiana because of receiving a federal grant. These are federal dollars that we applied for in Indiana. It is voluntary, it is free for pregnant and postpartum Medicaid members and their infants impacted by opioid use disorders. PPP connects individuals to prenatal, postpartum, and whole person health care. PPP addresses mental health and behavioral health conditions. PPP assists with entering OUD treatment and recovery services. The Pregnancy Promise Program helps participants with wraparound services such as safe housing, transportation, nutrition. PPP builds relationships through trust and care and provides hope for the future. In the 3 years that Indiana has been receiving these federal grant dollars, we've continued to expand it and are now helping thousands of individuals throughout this state and their infants. Here is a data point that threw me off my chair when I was attending the FSSA Medicaid meeting. 94% of PPP participants maintained recovery through the 12 months postpartum. See what you can do when you help people get housing, food, transportation, treatment, care, wraparound services for the whole person. This is comprehensive care. It is liberating. It is driven by the individual, and it is leading to healing results. But this effective and evidence-based approach is not free and does take budgeting priorities. It does take our tax dollars and our commitment to these individuals that they are important, that they are worth our investment. It takes trust, it takes many hands, it takes courage. Speaking of courage, I love this picture. I love the people in this picture. My life is richer for knowing the individuals in this photo. Gregory May is in this photo. This was taken on the day that Stride Center was opened up in 2019. So many folks were there to make this possible, and his legacy has been witnessed throughout this summit, and to see what we're continuing because of his good work. But so many people and years went into opening our Stride Center in Monroe County. Stride Center opened in 2019, but we had those conversation and that vision in 2017 at our first summit. We had that vision, but we knew we needed a physical space. We needed that courage, that commitment. We needed it to provide comprehensive care, care coordination to people in crisis who are in the throes of their substance use disorder. We are doing good work in Monroe County, and the Stride Center is a critical piece of that work. And Gregory May was central to its opening, and we miss him, I miss him, and I am grateful for his legacy and grateful that we are here carrying that out. This was 2019. The state of Indiana took a bit more time to trust. Remember, generational trauma takes time, but to trust harm reduction strategies. And the state of Indiana has resisted the embrace of evidence-based comprehensive services and care. But in 2023, we passed Senate Enrolled Act 1. In the Indiana Senate, this was the first Senate Bill 1 for 2023. The Senate said this is our priority, and we would be passing a bill of significance to get Indiana communities the support they desperately need to address the overwhelming overdoses and increases in the diagnoses of SUDs. This was a bipartisan and unanimous effort. Let me be clear, this got so much airtime. The media covered. We were so excited that we passed SEA 1 with that support. But it was not the funding piece. The funding piece would come in the budget that we did at the end of that session. While Senate Enrolled Act 1, Senate Bill 1, was a bipartisan effort, it added Indiana to a Medicaid demonstration program, again, federal dollars. And what SEA 1 did was just allow FSSA to apply for this money to expand access to mental health care and treatments for substance use disorders. It would include funding for the 988 crisis line as well. It would enable that funding. The legislation made possible a matching program with the federal government that requires comprehensive services and care coordination all in one place to help people navigate their mental and physical health care and social service needs. No piecing it together, no death by 1,000 cuts, so to speak. It required the state to identify the person who would help, the organization that would help in access, treatment, and recovery, and wrap-around services in one place. The Indiana Behavioral Health Commission reported in 2020, out of which this legislation was birthed, that what we needed to get the job done was $103 million. So that's the good news. We knew exactly what we needed to do to make this happen for the state of Indiana. $130 million for the services, the wraparound comprehensive care that individuals needed. The bad news, by the time the budget came around, it got $30 million. And that was a choice. That was a choice. We knew we needed $130 million, but we did not have the courage, and we only funded it with $30 million. Is not that the age-old problem in our recovery journey? We know what we need to do, and we just don't do it. We know that in order to move the needle, or to stitch that needle, we must keep moving that needle in our recovery, and we must continue to insist on fully funding evidence-based practices when it comes to caring and providing comprehensive care and access to treatment in the state of Indiana. And these are the lessons that my grandma Yoder's quilt teaches me to this day. So now let's move on to my grandma Hirschberger's quilt, the quilt that I like to call the World War II quilt, and I'll tell you why. This quilt, in the mid to late 1930s, my grandma Hirschberger would work for a dress manufacturer in Elkhart, Indiana. I love this, the factory they're saying was, we make house and wash dresses. House and wash dresses. I mean, who's cleaning house and washing anything in a dress? I don't know. The scraps that my grandmother, as she worked there, as she made the dresses, the scraps would fall on the floor, and this really bothered her. And so she asked her foreman if she could pick them up at the end of the day and keep them. Over the course of her time with the factory, she kept all the scraps, and she hoped to one day make quilts for what she thought would be her grandchildren. My grandmother would go on to have 3 children and 8 grandchildren, and each one of us got one of these quilts. Think about the lives of the women who wore these house dresses. In each of these patches came from a dress worn by someone in the 30s, in the 40s, and if you're like me, probably into the 50s. My grandmother had a sister, Eva, and Eva would go on to also have 3 children. My grandmother had 3 kids, and my Aunt Eva had 3 kids. Meet Sid. Sid is one of my Aunt Eva's great-grandsons, my cousin. Sid was a beautiful, talented, fun, beloved, funny, wildly skilled chef. And he also had substance use disorder. We so often, through our numbers, when we talk about, I heard someone say death by dashboards. We actually have in the state of Indiana a dashboard of overdoses that we can see sort of where they are to know where we need to prioritize our funding. And sometimes those numbers get so big, it is hard to make sense of or to feel anything. It's just a big number. In 2023, 2,190 individuals died by overdose in Indiana. In 2022, 2,682 individuals in the state of Indiana died by overdose. In 2021, 2,206 individuals died by overdose. And these are the people, the daughters, the grandsons, the aunts, the friends that we miss terribly each and every day. They are just as huge as that big number in our lives. And until one of those numbers become one of your loved ones, it breaks your heart open for every single one of those numbers, every single one of those family members. And we must remember that our recovery includes remembering them into this process, this journey, this stitching together of our recovery. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? How do we strengthen our communities? How do we strengthen our connections? How do we remember our connections? This is a map of Indiana. I don't have to tell you that, you know this. The darker the shape of, these are counties. A side note, I'm gonna do a little side note, I'll be right back. But isn't it interesting? They always use this, even at the State House. And I'm like, how are people supposed to know which is their county? I mean, maybe that is a problem that I have. I don't know, but let me show you. I'm gonna tell you where. Look at this, very far. I just wanna make sure I have this right. I think this is us. That is us. It's pretty good. I love how rich and dark it is. The richer and darker your county is, that means the more resources you have, that you are prioritizing when it comes to treating, addressing, supporting people with mental health and substance use disorders, and addressing overdoses. But I will say this. We're not as dark as Tippecanoe County, so we can do more. I'm competitive. But we can feel pride in how dark it is. We are not as dark as we should be, as we could be, which is why I love this metaphor with this language. You know, that language of light and dark? It's dangerous. I love that we want to be a rich, dark color. But there are still some programs of connection that we can build, and I hope we were filled with good ideas today. We can continue moving our needles and stitching together a stronger recovery quilt for Monroe County. But look at the rest of our state. Look how white, too light, the rest of the state, the rest of the counties in Indiana are. Our connections are only as strong as our neighbors. Our rich, dark highlights the efforts being done to focus on and reducing harms and increasing the prevention of opioid misuse across Indiana. The shades reflect the prevention and harm reduction programs happening in our communities. But we must keep moving that needle in Monroe County. We must keep supporting and educating so to turn all of Indiana into a state of connection and comprehensive care, where each individual is seen and cared for holistically. We need more naloxone education and training. We need more support for syringe services and harm reduction programs. We need overdose fatality review programs and response projects. We need our first responders to get them more connection to training and support. So these are the lessons that my grandmother Hirschberger's quilt has taught me. So now let's focus on our third quilt, our recovery quilt. I want us to take part in, I don't know about you, my grandmother Hirschberger actually tried to teach me how to quilt, but you don't want me probably fixing your car or making a quilt, but we're gonna do a little activity and do our own quasi-recovery quilt here today. You have these squares in front of you. and binding clips. Find some pieces of paper. Write 1, write 2, write 5, write 10. I've brought so many scraps pieces of paper. We're going to take some time and we're going to write down some words from this day. Thoughts, ideas, hopes, names of people that we've remembered, names of people that we appreciate. And we're going to write them down, and in the quiet, we're going to write them down, do a lot because I had a lot of paper cut for this. We're going to walk over and we're going to make our own quilt using these binder clips. And we're going to have a beautiful display, and we're going to make Grandma Hirschberg and Grandma Yoder very proud. But let's take some time to write down some of these, and we'll be back together in just a moment. The great thing is there are no mistakes. So someone said, what are we doing? And I said, probably for many of us, planning what we're going to have for supper. But what I would like you to do is, on these scrap pieces of paper, on these pieces, are there names of people you want to lift up and remember? Are there ideas that you had, dreams that you have for our community, for our state? Are there memories that you have that you want to stitch into your own recovery? Are there possibilities in harm reduction that our community is not seeing? We're just going to write them down, and in an act of crafting, we're just going to bind them with our binding clips to this black drape, because we don't have Tuesday sewing time in the summit. We're going to make our sewing with, if you're like me, you use glue, but today we're going to use clips. so much.
By the time I got home at 7,
Yeah,
so in less than 24 hours, I made an entire book.
that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for opening yourself up to this arts and crafts moment. I was chuckling. I think I told Michelle Sills, where are you, Michelle? She was so integral in making all of this happen in event planning. Are you here, Michelle? In the back. Michelle Sills. I mean, we were, last night at 11:30, we were emailing back and forth, calling, texting, all week in preparation for this. Thank you, Michelle. But thank you for participating in this moment of creativity. I told Michelle, I said, I'm kind of chuckling because Greg May would both love this and hate me for it. So I sort of brought him with us in this little crafting experience. But thank you. Thank you for opening yourself up to this. Each piece is a testament to the contributor, to you, and your individual perspective on connection in recovery. As a whole, the quilt reflects our extraordinary capacity to provide comprehensive care. We are a resilient, resourceful, courageous bunch. And finally, our recovery quilt reflects the contribution of the creative process in this work. We must bring in the opening of ourselves to the idea of innovation and creativity as we consider recovery and connection. It will never look like you think it needs to look and will be different than what you think it should be. And being open to that process is good for the soul and good for healing. It's good for recovery. I did not understand the significance of Tuesday's Sewing Day at Shore Mennonite Church growing up. And honestly, I could not figure out how a person could sit still for that long. But we learn, we grow, we change, and we keep moving that needle forward in Monroe County. In Indiana and throughout this country, we are going to move that needle to stitch connection throughout our recovery. Grandma Yoder's quilt, Grandma Hirschberger's quilt, our own recovery quilt. I leave you with this quote from Saving Our Own Lives by Shira Hassan. Let's give our people what they need so that they can be free and so that they can decide for themselves what freedom and liberation means for them and how to reduce the harm in their lives so that they can reach their goals. Thank you, Monroe County Substance Use Disorder Advisory Commission, for inviting me here today for this summit, for the work that goes into these summits, and for giving us an opportunity to connect. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this summit today. I hope that you all learned a lot, made some good connections, found some resources, and are rejuvenated in this work and in this cause. I just want to mention just a couple things, but I'm going to let you go very soon. First, it was requested by Nick Voiles, the Executive Director of Indian Recovery Alliance, that I announced that their new van is named Penny in honor of Commissioner Penny Givens for her support of harm reduction. Thank you, Penny. I also want to make sure that I touch on our sponsors once again. Our platinum sponsor, the City of Bloomington Office of the Mayor, Carrie Thompson. Thank you so much for your generous platinum sponsorship. I also want to thank our silver sponsors, the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, as well as the Monroe Convention Center. And finally, I just want to say thank you to Dr. May's family for providing that beautiful soul to this world. And I hope that we all remembered him well today and that we will carry his cause forward in supporting and loving those who are experiencing drug use issues. So thank you so much. There will be a survey, I think. Yes, hey. We created a survey, so if you would scan this little QR code and let us know what you thought we did well, what you think we could do better. We would greatly appreciate your feedback. And if there's not a question asked that you would like to answer anyway, I give you full permission to just free-form it in one of those blanks that's available to you. That's fine. Lastly, I just want to say, there was a lot said about some of the changes that we can make to policy and law, and those are big changes, and we do live in a conservative state. But I just want to thank the lawmakers in the room. Representative Matt Pierce is here, of course, Senator Yoder, and they are really doing great work for us at the state. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope that you had a great day and that you continue to have hope, hold hope in your heart. And as Chris Abert, the former executive director of Indian Recovery Alliance, used to say, kick the love up a notch. All right, take care.